All right, so get this. You actually sent in a deep dive request on how your brain learns and remembers. That's pretty meta, isn't it?
It is fascinating, and it shows a real desire to understand the processes behind our own thinking, you know?
Exactly. We've got excerpts from this book, Learning and Memory, The Brain in Action by Marilee Sprenger. And we're going to try to break down complex neuroscience into practical tips you can actually use. And don't worry, this isn't just about acing your next exam or, this is about understanding why you sometimes blank on a friend's name or, let's be honest, where you put your keys.
Yeah, we often take our brains for granted. This deep dive is a great reminder that it's an incredibly complex and dynamic organ, you know?
Okay, so let's start with the superstars of the show, neurons. I remember learning about them in school, but it always felt kind of abstract.
Well, think of neurons as tiny messengers constantly sending signals throughout your brain.
Okay.
There are billions of them, creating a vast network that allows you to think and learn and experience the world around you.
Billions, really. It's hard to even wrap your head around a number like that.
It is, and each neuron has these branches called dendrites, which receive messages from other neurons, like a massive communication system. And the more connections you have, the more efficiently information travels.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The book talks about how an enriched environment can actually lead to more dendrite growth.
That's right. Think of it like this. If you were to lift weights regularly, your muscles would get bigger and stronger. Similarly, when you challenge your brain with new experiences and learning opportunities, you're essentially giving your neurons a workout,
Yeah.
leading to more connections and a more adaptable brain.
So what kind of brain workout would create an enriched environment? Is it like doing crossword puzzles or something?
It can be anything that stimulates your mind and forces you to think in new ways can contribute to an enriched environment. Learning a new language, for example, can be a great way to challenge your brain.
Yeah.
Or engaging in deep conversations that expose you to different perspectives. Even something as simple as taking a different route to work each day can force your brain to adapt and create new neural pathways.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. I'm definitely guilty of getting stuck in routines. So these neurons are constantly talking to each other. But what's the language they're using? What are they saying?
They communicate through chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. You can think of them like the postal service of the brain, delivering messages from one neuron to another.
Okay, so what are some of these important messages being sent?
Well, there's dopamine, which is often called the feel-good chemical because it's associated with pleasure and reward. It also plays a role in movement, which is why people with Parkinson's disease who have low dopamine levels often experience tremors and difficulty with movement.
Interesting. I always thought dopamine was just about feeling happy.
It is involved in those positive feelings, but it's also crucial for regulating movement and attention. Then there's epinephrine, which is responsible for the fight or flight response. It helps you react quickly in stressful situations.
Oh, so that's why my heart races when I'm about to give a presentation.
Exactly. Epinephrine is preparing your body to deal with the perceived threat. And then we have cortisol, which is often called the stress hormone, while it's essential for survival. Chronic stress can lead to high levels of cortisol, which can actually damage the hippocampus, a key area of the brain involved in memory formation.
Okay, so managing stress isn't just about feeling better emotionally. It's also crucial for protecting our brains.
Absolutely. It's all interconnected now to understand where all this activity is happening. Let's visualize the brain's layout.
Is this where the three-story house analogy comes in? I remember that from the book.
Exactly. Imagine your brain as a three-story house. The ground floor is the brainstem, the most primitive part of the brain, responsible for basic functions like breathing and heart rate.
So that's what keeps us alive. What about the second floor?
The second floor is the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain. Think of it as the control center for feelings like fear, pleasure, and social bonding. And this is where that hippocampus we talked about resides.
All right, so that's the emotional brain, what's happening on the top floor.
The top floor is the neocortex, which is responsible for higher level thinking, planning, language, and consciousness. It's what makes us uniquely human. And here's a mind-blowing fact. This incredible organ, your brain only makes up about 2 to 3% of your body weight, but it uses a whopping 20 to 25% of your body's total energy.
Wow, that's a lot of energy for such a small organ. It must be doing some pretty important work.
It is, and one of its most critical functions is storing memories.
Speaking of memory, the book talks about different types of memory, or lanes as they call it. Could you walk us through those?
Absolutely. There are at least 5 distinct memory systems: semantic, episodic, procedural, automatic, and emotional. Semantic memory is like your mental encyclopedia storing facts and information.
So like remembering the capital of France or the formula for the area of a circle.
Exactly. Then there's episodic memory, which is responsible for remembering events and experiences. It's like your personal time machine, allowing you to relive those special moments in your life.
Okay, so that's how I remember my last birthday party or that amazing vacation I took.
Precisely, then we have procedural memory, which is responsible for remembering how to do things like riding a bike or tying your shoes.
So it's the muscle memory that allows us to perform actions without consciously thinking about each step.
Exactly. Automatic memory is for things that become so ingrained in our minds that we don't even have to think about them, like multiplication tables or driving a familiar route.
And finally, there's emotional memory, which I think we can all relate to. It's the type of memory that's tied to strong emotions, whether positive or negative.
That's right. Emotional memories are often the most vivid and long-lasting because they involve a part of the brain called the amygdala, which plays a key role in processing emotions.
So it's like those emotionally charged experiences get imprinted in our brains more deeply.
Exactly.
It's amazing how these different memory systems work together to shape our experiences and who we are. But how do we actually get information into these different lanes in the first place?
That's a great question, and it leads us to the fascinating process of memory formation.
Well, I'm all ears. Tell me more about how memories are made.
It all starts with sensory input.
So we left off talking about how it all starts with sensory input. What happens next?
Well, imagine you're walking through a bustling city. There's so much going on around you: sights and sounds, smells, textures. Your brain is constantly bombarded with this sensory information, but it can't process everything at once.
Right, it would be totally overwhelming.
Exactly. That's where attention comes, and attention is like a spotlight that your brain uses to focus on specific pieces of information while filtering out the rest.
So it's like my brain is a bouncer deciding what gets into the VIP area of my consciousness.
That's a great analogy, and the information that makes it past the bouncer is then transferred to short-term memory. Think of short-term memory as a temporary holding space, like a mental sticky note.
So it's where I keep track of things like a phone number I just heard or the items on my grocery list.
Exactly. But short-term memory is very limited in capacity, and duration information can only stay there for a few seconds unless it's actively rehearsed or transferred to long-term memory.
Okay, so how does information make that leap from short-term to long-term memory?
That's a process called encoding, and it's influenced by a number of factors, including meaning, emotion, and repetition information that is meaningful to us, that connects to our existing knowledge and experiences, is much more likely to be encoded effectively.
So if I'm learning about something that I'm genuinely interested in, I'm more likely to remember it.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to find ways to make learning personally relevant, and engaging emotion also plays a crucial role, as we talked about earlier. The amygdala tags emotionally significant experiences as important and makes sure they're stored. This is why you might remember a particularly funny or embarrassing moment from years ago, but forget what you had for breakfast yesterday.
Oh, I definitely have some embarrassing memories that have stuck with me. So meaning, emotion, and what was the other one?
Repetition: the more we rehearse information, the more we strengthen the neural connections associated with that information. Think of it like building a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
So practicing something over and over, like learning a new language or a musical instrument, helps to solidify those memories.
Exactly. It's not just about mindless repetition, though. Active recall, where you try to retrieve information from memory without looking at your notes, can be even more effective.
So like quizzing yourself instead of just rereading the textbook.
Precisely. And spacing out your practice sessions over time rather than cramming everything in at once can also significantly improve memory retention.
Interesting. So once this information is encoded and stored in long-term memory, how do we access it when we need it?
That's the process of retrieval, and it can be influenced by a variety of factors, including context and emotional state. Remember how we talked about episodic memory being linked to specific locations? Well, that's why being in the same environment where you learn something can make it easier to recall the information.
It's like when I go back to my childhood home and suddenly all these memories come flooding back. The house itself acts as a cue.
Exactly, and our emotional state also plays a role if we're feeling stressed or anxious. It can be harder to access stored information. That's why test anxiety can be such a problem for students.
So are there strategies to improve retrieval and access those memories more easily?
Absolutely. One technique is to create retrieval cues, which can be anything that helps you associate the information with something else, making it easier to recall.
So like using mnemonic devices or creating mental images to represent concepts.
Exactly. Another helpful strategy is to practice spaced retrieval, where you test yourself on information at increasingly longer intervals. This helps to strengthen those neural connections and make the information more accessible.
So instead of cramming for an exam, it's better to review the material over a longer period.
Yeah, that's the idea. It's about making retrieval a regular habit, which helps to solidify those memories in your long-term storage.
This all makes so much sense. It really is about understanding how our brains work, not just trying to force information in there.
It is, and the amazing thing is that our brains are incredibly adaptable. That's what we call brain plasticity.
Okay, break that down for me. Brain plasticity. What does that actually mean?
It refers to the brain's remarkable ability to change and rewire itself throughout our lives. It means that our brains are not fixed or static. They can grow, adapt, and even recover from injury.
So even though we might lose some brain cells as we age, we can still form new connections and learn new things.
Absolutely. And this plasticity is influenced by a variety of factors, including our experiences, our environment, and even our thoughts and beliefs.
So engaging in new activities, challenging ourselves mentally, and maintaining a positive outlook can actually help to shape our brains in positive ways.
Precisely, think of your brain as a muscle that needs to be exercised regularly. Learning a new skill, engaging in creative activities, and staying socially connected can all contribute to a healthier and more resilient brain.
I love that. So it's not just about trying to memorize facts, it's about enriching our lives in ways that promote brain health.
Exactly, and it's never too late to start.
This concept of brain plasticity is so hopeful. It reminds me of that quote by This concept of brain plasticity is so hopeful. It reminds me of that quote by neurologist Santiago Ramon y Cajal. Every man can, if he so desires, become the sculptor of his own brain.
It's a powerful reminder that we have more control over our cognitive destinies than we might think.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the building blocks of neurons to the intricate pathways of memory formation. What are some key takeaways that you think would be helpful for our listeners to remember?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's crucial to remember that learning is an active process. It's not something that just happens passively. We need to engage our minds, seek out new experiences, and challenge ourselves to think in new ways.
So no more zoning out in front of the TV for hours on end.
Well, a little bit of downtime is fine, but it's important to make sure you're also giving your brain a regular workout. And remember, it doesn't have to be anything strenuous or boring. Find activities that you genuinely enjoy and that stimulate your mind.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot between challenge and enjoyment.
Exactly. Another key takeaway is to be mindful of the impact that stress can have on your brain. Chronic stress can actually impair memory function and make it harder to learn new things.
So all those times I felt like my brain was fried from stress. There's actually a scientific explanation for that.
There is. When we're stressed, our bodies release cortisol, which in small doses can be helpful for focus and alertness. But when cortisol levels remain high for prolonged periods, it can actually damage the hippocampus, a key area of the brain involved in memory formation.
So finding healthy ways to manage stress is crucial, not just for our mental health, but for our cognitive function as well.
Absolutely, whether it's through exercise, meditation, spending time in nature, or connecting with loved ones, find what works for you and make it a regular part of your routine.
It's like giving your brain a spa day. Okay, so
Okay.
we've got active learning, stress management. What else?
Well, thinking back to the different memory systems we discussed, it's important to recognize that we don't learn and remember everything in the same way. Some information is better suited for semantic memory, while other things are more easily encoded through episodic or procedural memory.
So instead of trying to cram everything into our brains using the same method, we need to be more strategic about how we approach learning.
Exactly. If you're trying to learn a new skill, for example, practice and repetition are essential. But if you're trying to remember a list of facts, creating meaningful connections and using mnemonic devices can be more effective.
It's about understanding our own learning styles and finding what works best for us. Any other words of wisdom you'd like to impart before we wrap up?
Well, I think it's important to remember that our brains are constantly changing and evolving. What we learn today can actually shape the physical structure of our brains tomorrow.
So it's not just about acquiring knowledge, it's about actually changing our brains for the better.
Precisely, and that's an incredibly empowering thought. It means that we have the potential to continue learning and growing throughout our lives.
So what does this all mean? Your brain is an incredible, adaptable organ. By understanding its inner workings, you can unlock your learning potential and create more vivid, lasting memories.
A final thought for you to ponder. We've talked about different memory lanes, but what happens when memories become intertwined, stored in more than one lane? How does that affect their power and impact? We encourage you to explore that question further.